Thanks for checking out this video. For a full list of materials used in this project, head down to the description below and click on Show More. My first step is going to be to use a ladder stitch to sit 6 of my cubes next to each other. And this will be where I start and build the rest of my bracelet from. So I've got one here for one side of my bracelet, and I'm going to do the other one here. So this is how I do this. I'm going to start with my stop bead, and my stop bead I'm just going to pick up one of those cubes and loop my thread around that cube a second time. So this is my first of the 6 cubes that I need. I'll pick up another cube and let that fall down to the next cube. And then here what I'm going to do is take my needle and just run up through that first cube, which was my stop bead, run up through this first cube, and as I pull, you'll see that the thread pulls tight and allows those 2 cube beads to sit right next to each other. So then I'm going to go down through my second bead. And at the beginning here sometimes, and even throughout a piece of ladder stitch that you're working on, you may see that it's kind of loose in places. And if that's the case, just go back through those beads again, and that will tighten everything up. So if you're a nut like I am about keeping everything nice and tight, sometimes you go back through those 2 beads again to make sure that everything's a little closer than you had it with just going through once. So I'm going to add a second bead here. So I'm going to pick up one of my cubes, go through the previous cube, let the thread pull those 2 beads together, give it a nice tight tug, and go down through the cube that you just added. This is pretty tight, so I'm not worried about it, but especially in the beginning, you might want to go through once or twice again, just to make sure that everything's nice and tight and you're starting with a really good foundation. Pick up another cube bead and down through the previous cube bead. Give it a nice tight tug so that your beads are sitting next to each other. With the cube beads, it's really nice to do this ladder stitch because they do have such straight right angles on them. So they will sit next to each other really comfortably. And this is essentially all we're doing, is just stacking one on top of the other or next to each other and holding them there with our thread. So I've got 5, so I need 6, so I need 1 more. And I'm doing 6 because if I do 6 beads across, this will give me the right length of a ladder stitch here, that it becomes the right width for my bracelet where I want to start. And I'm also going to be using one of my long oval clasps. The long oval clasps have 5 loops here where I can connect something. If I use 6 of my square bead, or my cube beads, they are 3-dimensional, so they are cubes. We do need to call them cubes. So if I use 6 of my cube beads, I will have 5 bridge threads here, and that is where I will connect to my 5 loops on my clasp. So a couple different reasons why I went with 6 cube beads. Right width, and 6 will give me 5 bridge threads. And if for those of you who are saying, what is a bridge thread? A bridge thread is simply the thread that you can see on the side here running between in and out of the holes of your beads. And that bridge thread will come back and we'll actually use that bridge thread to attach our clasp. So if I have 5 bridge threads and I have 5 loops on my clasp, that is perfect, and I don't have to think very hard about how to attach my clasp. So now that I have one of my little sections here, or little pieces here of my ladder stitch, I'm going to make a second one. So go ahead and make a second one, and then we'll go ahead and get started on our bracelet. So I wanted to just make a quick note on the extra thread that you're going to have when you finish your little ladder stitch here. I have quite a bit of thread here still that's on my needle. Go ahead and leave that thread on both pieces. We made both pieces of this ladder stitch separately, and we're going to use the extra thread that's attached to it separately as well, and then sort of meet in the middle, and you'll see what I'm talking about once we get started here with the bracelet. Coming out of one of my beads here at the end, and we want to come out of the last cube. So if you're not there, just go ahead and take your needle and wrap it around however you need to, go through the bead next to it if you need to, and get to that position where you are coming out that last cube. And now at this point, we're basically just going to do some stringing, but I have a specific pattern that I want to follow. So I'm going to go ahead and share that pattern with you so you can make yours like the way, in the same pattern that I'm doing mine, if you would like to. I'm going to start with my smaller beads. So I have a seed bead here. This is an 11-0. I'm going to pick that up, and then I'm going to follow it with one of my little crystals here. These are 3mm aqua. I'm going to also add a seed bead. I'm actually going to be adding a seed bead in between all of my other beads. So like I said, this is the pattern that I like, that I wanted to use for this bracelet, but you can always switch it up and do whatever you'd like, so you don't have to put the seed beads in between, but it will change the length of your bracelet. Anything that you add or subtract, of course, will add or subtract to the length of the bracelet. I'm going to now pick up some of my larger beads. So I'm going to do a series of my 4mm pearls with just a little stop bead or a seed bead. We use them so much as stop beads, but they're really seed beads. And the pattern that I've chosen here is to do 6 of my pearls. So I've got 3 on here. I need 3 more of my pearls with that little seed bead in between. I am aiming to make about a 7.5-inch bracelet when I'm done with this, if I've done all my calculations correctly. So we'll see how well I did at the very end. To figure out how many beads I needed of each size, what I did was use partially a ruler, but then I also used, if I can get it out here, my little mini bead tray. So this will help me as I work. I actually use this to decide, okay, if I wanted about 1.5 inches of beads, I put my beads section here, my row of beads that I wanted to measure, down here and at the 0, and if I go outwards here, you can see better on this side. This is a 1, so this stands for 1 inch, and then out one more mark that's 1.5 inches. So that gave me an idea that about 1.5 inches is what I needed there, so that turned out to be 6 beads. This is a really handy little guy for just traveling and keeping with you if you just want to keep it in a drawer. It gives you measurements and as well as giving you some nice little compartments. So that guy came in handy. I was very happy to have that in the studio with me today. Oop. I'm scattering my beads everywhere. There we go. So my next section here, I'm going to pick up my seed bead because I'm always adding that in between all my beads. And then we're going to do something a little more interesting here. I'm going to pick up my crystal, my bicone crystal, a seed bead, and then we're going to start picking up some of the mermaid glass. I love being able to use something like the seed bead or this crystal that I use in multiple places. I like being able to have a shape or a color that is used consistently or periodically through a piece, that gives it some continuity from beginning to end or throughout the different parts. If you have a big necklace that has a lot of different components to it, using the same size, using the same shape, color, it just helps give you that continuity. And having even just that one element that's the same, that's popping up throughout the piece, will help give your piece that sense of everything belongs here. So my pattern here is seed bead, crystal, seed bead, and then a mermaid glass. Seed bead, crystal, seed bead, and then a mermaid glass. And I believe for this I need 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So I'm going to need 9 of these to reach the length that I want. So I'm going to continue stringing. Oops, and I forgot a seed bead here. So the pattern that we're going to continue is going to start with my crystal here. Crystal, seed bead, mermaid glass, and then seed bead, crystal, seed bead, mermaid glass, crystal, seed bead, or seed bead, crystal, seed bead, mermaid glass, and I'm going to continue that. It's essentially just a mermaid glass with this little set of 3 beads here, the seed bead, the crystal, and the seed bead in between. So I'm going to continue that until I have 9 of my mermaid glass on. And then I'll move back to doing this section here to the end. So I'm going to go ahead with that and finish up this length of the bracelet here, this side, and then we will move on. I've now finished beading my first strand of my bracelet. And you can see here that I have it starting here with the little bit of ladder stitch, starting with that first cube, and that's where my strand is coming from. And then I finish it here at the end. And what I've done is I've actually used that last bead a little bit like a stop bead. And I just ran my needle and thread through that bead once again, just like you would with a stop bead, and gave it a little tug just to make sure that I didn't have any slack between my beads here. And then that's going to hold everything in place for now. On the second piece of my ladder stitch here, I've also gone ahead and done the same thing. So I have the exact same pattern here, starting with the ladder stitch. So I've essentially just did a duplicate of the original, or the first one that I did. And I still have my thread and needle attached to this one as well. And also the same here with my last bead, my last 11-0 being a little stop bead. I don't want my beads to be rolling around too much while I'm working with this. So now to start connecting these two pieces together, I'm going to actually set them up opposite of each other. So if I bring this down a little bit so we have this end in frame, what I'm going to do is I'm going to flip one of my pieces so that the little ladder stitch end is here opposite, and the end where I have where I'm ending with my crystal and my little seed bead here that I used as my stop bead, and this is going to be on this end. So if I can kind of go back and forth here, I have this happening on one side, and on the other end here I have the same thing, just opposite. I'm now going to start putting these two pieces together with my needle and thread here, and you can start on either side, it doesn't matter because it should be identical. I'm going to take the strand here that isn't attached yet to the ladder stitch, and I'm going to go through that last cube in my ladder stitch. and then just go up through that cube and down through the next cube. So at this point, I'm ready to start a new strand of beads. And I'm just going to pick up the same number of beads and in the same pattern. So it's going to be pretty easy for me. I'll just follow along and use what's already here as a guide. So I'm going to start again with one of my seed beads, and I'm going to pick up a little crystal bicone, another seed bead, and let that fall down. And then I'll start here with my pearls. I'm going to start with my pearl, a seed bead, and then another pearl. Again, just following the same pattern that I did for my other two strands. So I'm going to go ahead and finish up this strand, and then I'm going to move on to adding my fourth strand. I've now finished my third strand. So my third strand here, I was working towards this end here, and I just ran it through the second cube here, which was the next open cube available. So I ran my needle and thread through there. So now to get started on my fourth strand, I'm going to work here with this end of my bracelet that still isn't attached to anything. And just like I did previously to add the other end on the opposite side, I'm going to go through that last cube, open on this end here, and down through the next cube. So up through the open one and down through the next one, and that will get me in position here to add another strand. So you can see that every time we're going to add a new strand, we'll be coming through one of the new cubes here, one of the open cubes here that we haven't used yet. So I'm going to go ahead and do a fourth strand just like this one, and then we'll see what that looks like. I now have my fourth strand finished, and I'm going to start working on my next strand, which is actually going to be my fifth and final strand. So if I look down here where my thread is, I went ahead and went through, I ended this second row here, or this second strand on this side, and I took my thread through the cube and back down through this cube here so that my thread is coming out of the third cube, just like we did in the previous steps. But I can here, I now have the option to either add a strand to each one of these center cubes, our third and fourth cube, or I can add one center strand. And I like the idea of adding the one center strand because then I'll have 5 strands instead of 6. And it's just always nice to have that odd number. So I'm gonna go ahead and I'm going to work this next strand just like I did the previous strands. So I'll have the strand going down the center here, and then I'll go through the third cube on this side, the one that is open and just waiting for me to take my needle and thread through that. So I'm going to go ahead and do that now, and then I'll show you how to incorporate your other piece of thread here that you haven't used into the fifth strand and how to tie everything together, and we'll get that clasp on. I'm just about ready to finish my fifth strand here, and my thread actually came off my needle, so here's a little impromptu tutorial on how to thread your needle. If your needle comes out or your thread comes out of your needle, make sure you have a nice pair of flat nose pliers, not the kind that have any kind of grooves inside, but just a really nice flat pair, and give that a nice good squish. And I like to pull that thread as close down to my fingers as possible. And if I'm lucky, I can get it on the first or second shot. If not, if it's frayed too much, then what you're going to want to do is give that a nice clean cut, because sometimes it's frayed too much or you've played with it too much and it's just difficult to get through that needle. But once you get it nice and get a nice clean cut with a thread burner or a really sharp pair of scissors, give that a good flatten and bring that needle eye right down over that thread. So that works pretty well for me. Okay, so moving on here, after that little impromptu tip on how to thread a needle, I have done now my fifth string here, my fifth string of beads here, or strand here in my bracelet. And what I'm going to do is very much like I did in the past. I'm going to take my needle and thread, go through that open cube bead here at the end. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my needle and thread and go around that cube bead again, just acting like a stop bead. And that way this will hold my thread in place while I pick up the other thread. So this thread is going to the side, and I'm going to pick up the thread that I was using for my other strands here. I had previously wrapped this around one of my cube beads here because I was using this as a stop bead for the same reason, just like I showed. So I can go in here and I can unwrap it, and then I don't have that thread sitting on the outside of my bead. So once you make that a stop bead, it's very easy to just unwrap it and you don't see the thread. You can leave the thread there too if that doesn't bother you, but I prefer to just take it off. So now coming out of that second cube bead, I'm going to go down through the third cube bead, and I'm going to share the beads of that fifth and center strand. The only bead that I'm not going to share is that first seed bead, and I'm going to pick that up by myself here, or by itself. I can pick up beads all by myself. So I'm going to pick that one bead up, and I'm going to go through the crystal, that first crystal bicone, and continue on through the rest of the beads. So you can see here as I give it a pull, it will just bring that seed bead and crystal, it'll move that towards the center. And then as I work my way down here, I will just pass with my thread that I'm currently using, pass down through the center section here, the center strand of all my beads. And as you do that, just be careful that you do get your needle and thread through all the beads and not on the outside of some of them, because that can be very easy to do if you don't go slowly and pay attention. I've taken my thread all the way down through the center strand here. So all my strands of beads here only have one thread running through them, but the center one has two because I took it through both ways. You can always go back through these strands if you want to make it more durable, if you feel like your thread maybe wasn't strong enough for the kind of beads that you're picking up, but I'm confident with the thread that I have with my dragon thread here. This is what I'm using, and I haven't had any issues with that, so I'm confident with the one strand running through, and then I did the two strands here for the center one. So I've ran this thread all the way down through the whole center strand of beads, except I did stop when I came out of my last crystal here. Just like on the other end, I want to pick up that one seed bead, so that one little lone seed bead, and go through the only open cube that I have left. It'll be third from the center, or third from the outside. And now once I have that, you can see here now I have my whole bracelet complete. And each side is symmetrical. At this point, what I have to do is now attach the ladder stitch to my clasp. So with my thread coming out of my bricks, or my, I always want to call this brick stitch, so if I've accidentally called it brick stitch, I meant ladder stitch. So coming out of my ladder stitch here, what I want to do is use those bridge threads to connect to each little loop on my clasp. So I like to start from one side and work to the other. I don't want to start in the middle. So I'm just going to take my needle and thread and travel up and down through these cubes until I get to the end. And I'm going to go under that first bridge thread. And that bridge thread again is just the thread that's kind of being exposed between the holes in the beads. And then it doesn't really matter because both sides of my project are the same. So it doesn't matter which side I start to connect to. I'm going to take my long oval crystal out though because I haven't glued it in yet, so it's going to fall out as I work here. And then all I'm going to do is go under that bridge thread and then go through one of my loops, and of course we want to match up the loops to the bridge thread. Say that 10 times fast. So I want to match up the bridge thread to the loop. So I want to attach the first bridge thread to the first loop, second bridge thread to the second loop, etc. And just do this a couple times. Make sure that you're just kind of going back and forth here. Really a few times is really all you need. And then I'm going to go over to the next bridge thread. And to do that, I can go down through one of my cubes and up through the other. I just think that this is a better way of moving from bridge thread to bridge thread than just traveling along the surface here, going up and down through the beads. To me, just gives a little added level of security. So again, just under the bridge thread and try to get through, or try to get under as many bridge threads as you can. Again, just for that extra security. And through a loop, under, oh, where am I? Okay, under bridge thread, as many as you can. And through the loop. So very simple. I think of it just like sewing a little button onto a pair of pants if you've ever lost a button. Just kind of going back and forth here. And we're going to do this on both sides of the clasp. So both sides of the clasp get attached exactly the same way. The loops on each side of the clasp are oriented slightly differently. So you'll notice that on one side we have these nice big loops that are flat and open. So very easy to get through. And then on the other side here, we have to take our needle through the other direction. So we'll take our needle through the other direction at a little bit of an angle to get through just one of those loops, but we'll attach it in exactly the same way using the bridge thread. So once you've got your ends connected, and remember to keep this flat so you don't get anything tangled. Once you get both sides of your clasp connected, we'll go ahead and see what the final piece looks like and add our lovely crystal there. I now have all of my strands finished and I've attached my clasp, so you can see how lovely this bracelet really is when it's all together. There's a lot of fluidity to this bracelet, so as you wear it, it really looks like stacks of strands, stacks of other bracelets on your wrist, but having that nice wide clasp, holding it all together and bringing it together there gives you this sort of Art Deco look, is like how I like to think about it. It has this bit of like a flourish feel to it. and then everything coming together here and cinching at the end here gives it this very tailored look. So the last thing that we need to do here is just add in our oval clasp there, or add the oval crystal to the clasp, which really ties all of these colors together. And that's actually how I selected the colors. I found the oval clasp that I wanted to use, and then I just looked at it for some inspiration for colors. I found this beautiful mermaid glass and this really pretty like peridot green, and this is the matte. And then the matte next to the shiny crystal here just looked really beautiful. And then I pulled in some darker colors that were very similar in tone, and some different colors here. Some different colors, some different shapes, just to kind of make it really interesting. So the last thing is just to put this little fella into his awaiting clasp. All we're going to have to do here is put a little dab of glue on either the crystal or the clasp. I'm going to go ahead and put it in the clasp and just put a little bit in there. You really don't need much, because once you put the crystal in, it will push the glue and the glue might come out the sides. So you're just going to give that a nice little push in there. Make sure it's down flat. Give it a good push. Give it a little inspection from all the angles and make sure that it looks good where it is before you set it out to dry. And depending on the kind of glue you use, it may take longer or less time to dry, so just pay attention to the length of time that your glue needs to dry, and don't be tempted to put on your bracelet before then, because you'll only be sorry and have to re-glue that clasp in. Thank you guys for joining me, and I hope that you enjoy your new, very Art Deco inspired bracelet. If you enjoyed this video, please comment below and let us know your thoughts. You can also subscribe to our channel to be notified as soon as we have more beading tutorials out that you will enjoy probably just as much as you enjoyed this one.